The story begins with Jane sneaking into a house in the dead of night, but as she cautiously enters, she realizes something shocking. A version of herself is already there. Surprised and confused, Jane quickly flees, which leads us to a flashback from 3 weeks earlier. In this flashback, we learn that scientists have recently made an astonishing discovery. Our universe is much larger than they ever imagined. They have confirmed the existence of parallel universes, each with its own version of Earth. Some of these Earths are teeming with life like ours, while others are barren, lifeless, or ravaged by nuclear wars. Although the scientific community knows that these parallel worlds exist, the mystery of how to travel to them remains unsolved. Up to this point, we are introduced to Jane, a dedicated scientist who lives with her husband Matt and their 2 children, Jack and Samantha, a small, happy family leading a normal life. One morning after breakfast, Jane heads to her laboratory where she is working on a secret project with her assistant, Reggie. The two are constructing a machine that could connect different universes, an advance that could change everything. They have built a teleportation device with 2 chambers. The first chamber is where objects are placed, and the second is where those objects are supposed to appear teleported from one chamber to the other. Before testing something valuable, Jane and Reg decide to experiment with an apple. They place it inside the teleportation chamber and activate the machine. The device scans the apple without any problems, but just as the teleportation process is about to begin, a massive blackout occurs. The lights in the entire building go out. When the power returns, the apple is still in the same place, unmoved. Jane realizes that the machine needs much more energy to function. The experiment had failed. Frustrated, Jane takes a break and meets with her husband Matt by the lake, a quiet place where they often spend time alone. She expresses her concerns and explains how the investors are pressuring her to finish the experiment quickly. Matt listens patiently and with unwavering confidence assures her that he believes in her and knows that she will succeed soon. In the following days, Jane and Reg repeat the experiment several times, but every attempt ends in failure. The only thing keeping Jane grounded is Matt's support. He always makes her feel better even after all these years of marriage. They deeply love each other. It was during one of these moments that a new idea struck Jane. While watching a video on a similar subject, an idea to increase the energy input of the machine suddenly came to her. Excited by this thought, Jane goes to the laboratory the next day, fully prepared to try again. She had adjusted the energy levels, and this time, when they activated the machine, there was a massive surge of energy. The apple disappeared from the chamber in an instant. Jane and Reg were thrilled. They had finally managed to teleport something. But their excitement was short-lived. The apple had vanished from its original chamber and had not appeared in the receiver. Both were perplexed. Where had the apple gone? Although the mystery of its whereabouts persisted, they couldn't help but feel a sense of achievement. They had successfully moved something, and they would soon discover where the apple had teleported. Having made a significant breakthrough, Jane was eager to share the news with her husband. She headed to the lake where they often met. But something felt off. Matt had not yet arrived, which was unusual since he had never been late. Her worry deepened when her phone rang and Matt's name appeared on the screen. When she answered, she heard his weak, trembling voice. He sounded injured, and in a shaky tone, he said he wasn't sure he could make it. He asked her to take care of their children, as if he knew that this might be their last conversation. Overwhelmed with panic, Jane ran toward the road only to find a terrible scene. Matt had been in a horrific accident and clearly had not survived. The loss hit her like a wave, leaving her devastated. In the following days, Jane was completely crushed. She drank constantly, barely able to bear the pain, while her young son watched helplessly, trying to get her to stop. Both children saw how deeply their mother was suffering, so they devised a plan. They invited Jane's younger sister Ruth to stay with them for a while, hoping her presence would help Jane overcome Matt's death. However, Jane couldn't let go of Matt. She was determined never to forget him, no matter what. Then one day, an idea struck her. She quickly called her assistant, Reg, and told him something important. After reviewing data from one of her previous experiments, she realized that the apple she had teleported had not appeared in its receiver as it should have. But instead, she had a theory. She believed that the apple had not disappeared at all. It had materialized in a parallel universe in a receiver similar to theirs, but in another world. Excited, Jane rushed to the laboratory where she explained her idea to Reg. Mentally, they had stumbled upon the discovery of a parallel world. The apple must have reached another universe where another version of Jane and Reg could be performing the same experiment. All they had to do now was find a way to make contact with that other world. Jane hypothesized that perhaps the versions of themselves in that other universe had not yet figured out how to operate their machine. So Jane and Reg came up with a plan. They would write down the formula to boost the machine's energy and teleport it in the hope that it would reach the other side. They did exactly that. They sent a note through the machine just as before, and the note disappeared. Jane suggested that they wait to see if they would get any sort of response to prove that another parallel world really existed. 2 days later, Jane's theory was confirmed. Reg called and told her to come to the laboratory immediately. When she arrived, they discovered a new note in the receiver chamber that simply said, "Thank you." Jane and Reg were elated. Soon after, the apple they had sent earlier returned, but this time with a bite taken out of it. This was solid evidence, proof that their theory was correct and that they had successfully teleported objects to a parallel world. But now, a more important question loomed. How many parallel worlds really existed? Were there only 2, or could there be 3,000 or even millions? They realized that they needed more evidence to find out. This time, they teleported an empty chamber. Shortly thereafter, the chamber returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It contained a recording. Jane and Reg played the video and, to their surprise, saw another version of Jane on the screen, greeting them with a hello and showing her laboratory where she was conducting the same experiment along with her own version of Reg. Jane on the screen looked somewhat different, as did the laboratory and the machine. Clearly, this parallel universe was not exactly the same as theirs. Jane and Reg were astonished. They had finally discovered another universe, one of the greatest discoveries ever made in the history of mankind, and they were very happy. After the success, Jane went to the lake where she and Matt often met. While there, she had another idea. What if, in that other universe, Matt had never died? A small spark of hope ignited within her. Without wasting any time, Jane ran back to the laboratory. Reg was not there, but Jane did not hesitate. She entered the chamber and without a second thought, teleported to the parallel world, where she believed Matt might still be alive. Jane had successfully arrived in the second universe, which from now on would be called Universe 2, and its versions of people would be designated with the number 2. Since Jane came from Universe 1, they would simply call her by her name. The laboratory in Universe 2 was a bit different from hers. Everything had a red tone instead of the familiar colors she was used to. She quickly left the laboratory, and not everything around her was the same. This version of Earth was much more advanced, with futuristic drones flying overhead, a stark contrast to the Earth she knew. But Jane was not there for the technology. She only had one thing in mind: Matt. Jane hurried toward the lake where she and her Matt used to meet, and to her surprise, Matt was there, just as she had hoped, alive. Without thinking, she ran to him, but Matt seemed shocked, almost terrified, as if he had seen a ghost. In a trembling voice, he said, "You died this morning." Jane quickly explained that she wasn't the Jane from this universe, but rather she had come from a parallel world. She told him everything, how his Matt had died in a tragic accident in her universe, and how she and her children had deeply missed him. Matt was still in shock. In this universe, they never had children. Suddenly, Jane realized that things in this world were very different from what she had known. Matt had died in her universe, but here it was Jane who had died in the same accident, and there were no children. Understanding the differences, Jane made a sincere plea to Matt. She asked him to return with her to her universe, explaining that there were no children in this world and that their Jane was already dead. Seeing the situation from his perspective, Matt agreed to go with her. Together, they hurried back to the laboratory, where they teleported back to Jane's original Earth, Universe 1. When Jane and Matt from Universe 2 returned to the laboratory, Reg was furious and immediately confronted Jane, warning her that bringing someone from a parallel world was reckless and dangerous. They had barely scratched the surface of how the space-time continuum worked, and Jane was risking the collapse of the entire universe just to satisfy her own desires. However, Jane defended her decision, reminding Reg that she had created the teleportation machine and that, in time, she would discover the rules governing parallel worlds. In the midst of this heated conversation, something strange happened. Matt from Universe 2 began looking at Reg with a strange intensity, as if he recognized him or knew something about him that neither Jane nor Reg was aware of. The reason behind Matt's strange behavior would soon be revealed. Jane took Matt home to introduce him to her children, Jack and Samantha. The children were overjoyed, believing that their father had returned from the dead. It was like a miracle. But for Matt from Universe 2, the situation was profoundly unsettling. He had no children in his universe, and seeing the children call him Dad was surreal. The challenges did not end there. In this world, it was known that the real Matt was dead, so they couldn't simply explain the presence of Matt 2 to everyone. Jane and Matt 2 decided that he would have to remain hidden for a few days until they could decide what to do. Despite everything, Jane was delighted to have a version of her husband back in her life, and they spent their days together exchanging stories about their respective worlds. Jane discovered that Matt 2's Earth was very different, much more technologically advanced, but also marked by violence. Matt 2 even carried a self-defense weapon, which surprised Jane. He explained that in his world, everyone carried weapons because danger was a constant reality. He also admitted that his Earth had become ugly due to the overuse of technology, which made Jane's Earth seem beautiful by comparison. The next morning, while Matt 2 was out for a walk, one of Jane's neighbors approached him. The neighbor was startled. He recognized him immediately and blurted out, "How are you alive? You're supposed to be dead. Are you faking your death to collect the insurance money?" Matt 2 tried to walk away, but the neighbor blocked his path and demanded a bribe to keep quiet, threatening to tell everyone that Matt was still alive unless he was paid immediately. Something snapped within Matt 2. In a fit of anger, he drew his futuristic weapon and, without thinking, killed the man. The situation had taken a dark and unexpected turn, leaving Jane shocked and terrified. This Matt 2 was nothing like the Matt she had known. The man she had brought into her world was a stranger, violent and with deep, disturbing issues. Matt 2 had mentioned before that violence was a way of life in his world, where people often killed each other, but now she was witnessing that violence firsthand. In recent days, Matt 2 had grown increasingly unstable. He often looked at Jack and Samantha with a disconcerting intensity and was easily agitated over minor things. One day, he exploded in anger with Samantha over a simple drawing she had made. Jane intervened, trying to calm him, and wondered if perhaps Matt 2 was struggling to adapt to this new world, since he wasn't used to children. She decided that it would be best to send the children to her sister Ruth's house for a few days, giving Matt 2 some space to adjust. Matt 2 agreed to the plan. Jane took the children to Ruth's house, hoping that some distance would help ease the tension. However, on her way back, her phone rang. It was Matt 2. Jane told him that she had dropped the children off and was heading to the laboratory to meet with Reg. The moment she mentioned Reg's name, something in Matt 2 broke. His voice turned cold, and he began yelling, accusing Jane of being unfaithful, calling her a lustful woman having an affair with Reg. At the sound of this, Jane's heart sank. With chilling clarity, she realized that this Matt was not only different, but dangerous. The man she had brought into her universe was not the one she knew. It was a violent stranger with deep, troubling issues. Jane raced back to the laboratory, her mind racing. She confided in Reg, admitting that she had made a grave mistake by bringing Matt 2 into her universe, and told him that she now suspected that Matt 2 was dangerous, potentially even a murderer. Determined to uncover the truth, Jane explained that she had to return to the universe of Matt to find out who the real Matt really was. Without hesitation, Jane returned to the teleportation chamber and teleported back to Universe 2, heading straight to the place where Matt had lived, her heart pounding with fear. What she found there was horrible. Inside the house, she discovered the lifeless body of Jane 2. A knot formed in her throat when the brutal reality hit her. Matt 2 had killed his Jane. Meanwhile, in Universe 1, Matt 2, now completely unhinged, stormed into the laboratory, demanding to know where Jane had gone. A startled Reg explained the truth, that Jane had returned to Matt's universe to discover the truth about him. Enraged, Matt 2 made his next move. First, he destroyed the receiver chamber, the only way for Jane to return to her own universe, thus trapping her in Universe 2. Then, he turned his rage on Reggie and killed him. At the same time, in Universe 2, an terrified and desperate Jane ran back to the laboratory. She tried repeatedly to teleport back to her real world, but something was wrong. No matter how hard she tried, the machine wouldn't work. Jane was trapped in this violent and dangerous world. At that moment, Reg 2, the version of Reg from this universe, arrived. He looked confused and worried, asking Jane where she had been for the last few days. He mentioned that he had been calling her repeatedly, asking why she hadn't answered. When Jane heard this, her heart sank as she realized something crucial. In this universe, Jane 2 had been having an affair with Reg 2. That was the reason why Matt 2 had killed Jane 2. Suddenly, everything made sense. In Jane's universe, she had never had an affair and deeply loved Matt. But Matt 2, coming from his own world, assumed that Jane was having the same affair with Reg in Universe 1, just as had happened in Universe 2. That's why he had looked at Reg with suspicion and anger. And that's why he had killed Reg in Jane's real world. Yet Jane was still unaware of Reg's death. Determined to have Matt 2 answer for his actions, Jane explained everything to Reg 2 and convinced him to help her restart the teleportation machine so that she could return to her universe and save her children from Matt 2. Together, Jane and Reg 2 managed to turn on the machine and they teleported out of Universe 2. But when they arrived at their destination, they quickly realized that something was wrong. They ran to Jane's house only to discover that a version of Jane was already living there. It was clear that they were not in Universe 1 or 2. They had accidentally teleported to a third universe, where yet another version of Jane existed. The scene was eerily familiar, as if it were a repetition of the events from the beginning of the story. Now more frustrated and frightened than ever, Jane told Reg 2 that they needed to return to the laboratory immediately. Once back at the laboratory, Jane explained everything, the whole truth. She revealed that Matt 2 had killed Jane, 2 after learning of her affair in Universe 2, and now Matt 2 was in Universe 1, where he was likely planning to harm her children. Believing she had been unfaithful, Jane was desperate to return to her world and stop him before it was too late. But this time, Reggie 2 made a decision. He had seen too much violence and chaos, and despite everything, he couldn't abandon this third universe. In this world, Jane was still alive, and there was the possibility that he might stay with her, even if she wasn't the same Jane he had known. Jane quickly entered the new codes into the machine and teleported once again, racing against time to save her children. Meanwhile, in her real universe, Matt 2 had completely lost his mind. He was on his way to Ruth's house, determined to kill Jane's children. But Jane arrived at Ruth's house just in time and, with a trembling voice, explained everything to Ruth and the children. She revealed that Matt 2 was a murderer from another universe who was coming to kill them, and they needed to hide immediately. But it was too late. Matt 2 had already arrived. Jane confronted him and said that she knew the truth, that he had killed Jane in his own universe. Enraged, Matt 2 prepared to use his weapon against her. Just when he was about to attack, Jane's son jumped in front of him and caught him off guard. Matt 2 fell unconscious, and together they tied him up. Now they were faced with a difficult decision. They couldn't go to the police because in this universe, the real Matt was dead. What could they possibly explain? After some discussion, they came up with a plan. They decided to teleport Matt 2 to a destroyed and uninhabitable universe, ensuring that he would never return. They took him to the laboratory and carried out the plan. Finally, they were free from the danger Matt 2 posed. But when Matt 2 awoke, he found himself in a fourth universe, a desolate world resembling a labyrinth where no humans remained. The environment was extreme, and Matt 2 realized with horror that he was trapped in a place worse than any hell he could imagine. condemned to this barren land forever as punishment for his terrible acts. 2 months passed, and Jane began to feel happy again. She and her children were at home when the doorbell rang. Jane went to answer it and, to her surprise, found Reg 2 standing on the doorstep, the same Reg 2 from the other universe to which Jane had originally traveled with Matt 2. Reg 2 had startling news for Jane. He told her that they had made a terrible mistake. The truth was that Jane was not in her real universe. She had ended up in a 5th universe, one that was almost identical to hers. He explained that in her real universe, the receiver chamber had been destroyed by Matt 2, and without it, Jane could never have returned. This meant that in Jane's real universe, Matt 2 had probably already killed her children.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.